uncertain world, and it is important for like-minded countries to have deep trading relationships, and this would have been an opportunity to get there. But it takes two to reach an agreement, and the EU just were not prepared to budge.
Trade talks between the EU and Australia has collapsed. The EU accusing our government of retabling demands on agricultural exports at the last minute, derailing the negotiations. Claims that the Albanese government say are untrue. I spoke to the Agriculture Minister, Murray Watt, a short time ago. Minister for Agriculture and Emergency Management, Murray Watt, thanks for your time. A spokesperson for the EU executive has said that while there was progress made on the EU free trade talks up until the ministerial meeting, that the Australian side retabled some agricultural demands which weren't consistent with the previous talks by the officials. What do you say to that?
Yeah, well, that's absolutely not correct, and it's disappointing that the European Union would be putting that around. The offer that Don Farrell had and put on the table is exactly what we've been flagging to the EU over the last 3 months. You'll remember that about 3 months ago, Don walked away, rightly, from the last round of negotiations because the deal that the EU was offering wasn't good enough. And unfortunately, what's happened here is that the EU have barely budged from a deal that we told them 3 months ago wasn't acceptable. So we've made clear from the very beginning that we wanted to do a deal with the EU. We can see value in getting more access to such a large, high-value market, but we're not going to do it at any price. And
Stop! What do you command?
It's just good business. And the last thing we were prepared to do was to sell out Aussie farmers just for the sake of a deal, and that's what signing up to that deal would have involved.
So despite that claim by the EU of a late game changer, there wasn't. Was it fundamentally just that they weren't going to budge
That's
on
exactly
reducing tariffs for agriculture?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's partly about tariffs and partly about the volume of exports that they would accept from us for things like beef, sheep, sugar, dairy, the terms of those exports. And obviously, in return for any concessions we're prepared to make as part of an agreement, you need to see concessions on the other side. And the value of the volume of exports that they were willing to receive and the terms of those just wasn't good enough for us to be able to put our hands on our heart and say it was in Australia's interest.
Did you think that they would have gone further given Australia's burgeoning role in, say, the critical mineral space?
We certainly hoped that when you put the entire deal together and the different things that it would cover, that the EU would see value in striking that deal. And it's disappointing that they haven't been willing to budge on some of those issues. I mean, it's also important from a strategic point of view. You know, we live in an uncertain world, and it is important for like-minded countries to have deep trading relationships, and this would have been an opportunity to get there. But it takes two to reach an agreement, and the EU just were not prepared to budge.